the phrase came from an M&A talk that I went to probably 7 or 8 years ago, is called "Burn the Lifeboat." And so,
Ooh.
yeah, and so when you bring an acquisition on, it's too easy to have that little lifeboat or that little dinghy that's floating along next to the main cruise liner and doing their own thing. And it's not until you burn that lifeboat and say everyone's going to come on board the main ship that you really get the value out of the thing that you're trying to do.
Is this thing on?
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Thank you, Fat Joe, and welcome back to Run the Numbers, where I interview world-class CFOs, operators, and the investors who fund them on how to get the most out of your company's performance. This podcast is a playbook of sorts for ambitious people in the worlds of finance, strategy, and operations. Today, my guest is Andy Ivanovich, the CFO of The Knot. If you've ever been married or been to a wedding, you've heard of The Knot. Andy explains how the company touches 2/3 of adult Americans each year, empowering celebrations all across the globe. We spend the episode dissecting The Knot's business model and how the company has expanded its product suite over time. More specifically, on this episode, we cover how The Knot essentially functions as the operating system for a wedding, the 5 dimensions present in their events or transactions: high cost, high complexity, high risk, high emotion, and high certainty, how they optimize for a supplier's lifetime value through a subscription model, the build, buy, or buddy framework for a roadmap expansion or M&A, managing a healthy level of friction amongst your peers, and why the CFO has a role in teaching the company how to think about complex problems and encouraging people to not accept conventional wisdom at face value. Andy speaks about the risk-weighted return on investment to evaluate decisions on a regular basis, and he also explains why burning the lifeboats is necessary as a company to fully commit to change. The Knot is a company I had experienced as a person who got married and vaguely knew there were wedding invitations going out and registry gifts being posted, but didn't really understand how the company made money. It was such a fascinating web of business lines that really made me think about the value of making the complex simple, especially in high-value transactions. All this and much, much more after a short word from our sponsors. Mercury knows your financial operations are complex. Founders and finance teams have to pull together different tools, reconcile transactions from different sources, and struggle to get accurate answers. With Mercury, you can simplify your operations with banking and software that power your critical financial workflows, all within the one thing every business needs: a bank account. And with new bill pay and accounting capabilities, you can pay bills faster, stay in control of company spend, and speed up reconciliation. Apply in minutes at Mercury.com and join over 200,000, ambitious startups that trust Mercury to provide the precision, control, and focus they need to transform their financial workflows so they can perform at their best. Mercury, the art of simplified finances. Mercury is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services provided by Choice Financial Group and Evolve Bank and Trust. Members FDIC. I'm getting good at that voice. Quick math: the less your business spends on operations, on multiple systems, on delivering your product or service, the more margin you have and the more money you keep. That's the goal, isn't it? But with higher expenses on materials, employees, distribution, and borrowing, everything costs more. Yesterday's price is not today's price. So to reduce costs and headaches, smart businesses are graduating to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one platform and one source of truth. With NetSuite, you reduce IT costs because NetSuite lives in the cloud with no hardware required. Access from anywhere. You cut the cost of maintaining multiple systems because you've got one unified business management suite. You improve efficiency by bringing all your major business processes into one platform, slashing manual tasks and errors. Over 37,000 companies, wow, that's a lot of customers, have already made the move. So do the math. See how you'll profit with NetSuite. And back by popular demand, NetSuite has extended its one-of-a-kind flexible financing program for a few more weeks. Head to netsuite.com/metrics. That is netsuite.com/metrics. Ooh, yeah, you know your boy loves some metrics. That's netsuite.com/metrics. Please do it, guys. I really need this. Andy, thanks for joining the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, CJ. Honored to be here. Really pumped.
So I need to take this opportunity to thank my friend Tim. And the reason why is when me and my wife, Caitlin, had our wedding, we had used The Knot where you're the CFO, and we had a wedding registry, and she put on 99 different things. I put on one, a Yeti cooler, and my friend Tim picked that out of all of them because he knew that I would like it the most. So thank you, Tim, for picking the one gift that I put on the wedding registry.
Great selection too. I feel like that's the perfect category for a wedding gift, something that you want, may not necessarily go out and buy yourself. So good on you, and thank you, Tim.
Yeah. So maybe we can start out by just explaining what the Knott's business model is, because I'm guessing there are a lot of CFOs and finance people listening who are either the one who, was the primary person driving the wedding and usage of the Knot, or the secondary person and kind of knew it was there and was sharing the link, and maybe wondering just how you make money.
Absolutely. So fundamentally, we are a technology company serving the broader celebrations industry. And within that, our primary focus is the $250 billion global wedding industry. And so we operate brands and marketplaces in 16 countries globally. And those range from, of course, the wedding focused properties, which is most of where our revenue comes from. But we also have properties related to having a child or planning any other type of celebration as well. And the way that we make money is, frankly, pretty complex for our scale. So I'll kind of step through it a little bit. But part of the reason why I think I've been at this business for as long as I have is that around every corner, it continues to surprise and find new things to keep me excited. So most of the way that we make money is through our two-sided marketplace. And that works pretty similarly to any other two-sided marketplace that you have experience with, which is we make effectively no money from couples, which are going to be the consumer side of our marketplace. Almost all of our services there are free to the couples. And then we generate revenue from advertisers who in the marketplace business tend to be smaller businesses, but it's the wedding professionals ranging from DJs, photographers, venues, caterers, etc., who can advertise to get promoted placement in that marketplace. And so when you, CJ, are looking for a DJ in New York City, I, as Andy's photo, can pay to have a prominent listing when you do that. That is most of our business model. That looks and feels, for I think everyone that listens to this podcast, looks and feels kind of like SMB SaaS. It has sort of those dynamics. It has a recurring subscription nature to the way that it works. And even though it's not software, it looks and feels like a software advertising package. On the other parts of our business, so marketplace is the core one. We have, in addition to that, e-commerce, which you mentioned registry earlier. That is broken up into registry, where we can make a small commission by referring people to gifts. So we have both a first-party registry model, which means we look and feel like a e-commerce retailer, as well as an affiliate registry model, which we partner with retailers to send couples their way. We also have a media business. Okay. And so our media business is going to look like any other online publisher. We actually even have a magazine. So we do online and offline advertising. And we have lots of other smaller revenue streams as well, but it is a fairly complex business for our scale.
That's awesome. And so if I play it back to you, it's advertising, like I need a DJ, I need a photographer. I think we actually did get a photographer through the Knot. You get, is it like they pay a monthly subscription every month to be featured on there? Is that how it works?
Exactly. So think very similar to other marketplaces that you might be familiar with, whether it's a Zillow, a Yelp, even some of the food delivery folks, where you can, as an advertiser, you can pay to boost yourself in the search results.
Got it. Okay, so we got married in South Salem, New York. So there was probably a photographer who would they be bidding up almost like a keyword? Is that how it works?
We are not there. I want to say yet. We'll see if it is something that's in our future. But given the nature of the business, and also given the nature of our advertisers, we've tried to keep things fairly simple. And so we typically set one monthly price that's consistent and will be personalized for the, it's almost like a 3-dimensional grid. So think about geography. Manhattan, New York is very different than Manhattan, Kansas. venue category. So a venue is going to be very different than an officiant. And then what tier of visibility do you want? And so between that, you can imagine a fairly large three-dimensional grid where we figure out what the right price is for a specific advertising package.
This is really neat. I mean, there is a lot to say just about simplicity, and then you get the recurring nature on top of it. Exactly. My mind as a CFO immediately goes to, well, maybe it could do better in an auction environment, but at the same time, that sword cuts both ways. It can also not do well, and it can be pretty cheap to get certain keywords. So I like the way that you've taken like a really simple subscription kind of element to this, and like you said, I guess it's geo by venue by category. That's pretty neat.
And you can imagine certainly much more complex models, and certainly as bidding becomes more prevalent elsewhere, perhaps that's something that we'll be able to do as well. But as you put yourself in the mindset of our typical wedding professional customer, they are largely going to be creative professionals. Their work, their brand is them, right? And so when we're talking about SMBs, we really serve like the VSB segment mostly. And so any time that they are trying to think about a bidding algorithm, trying to navigate our tools, trying to figure out how to market themselves online, that is time that they are not spending practicing their creative work. Yeah. So we see a big part of our mission around SMB enablement, making their lives easier, just providing them the tools, the customer acquisition, and all the functionality and training around that. We actually have a fairly robust Wedding Pro education part of our business as well, where we're teaching folks about trends and, how Gen Z is now in wedding age. Like, how do you cater your services to Gen Z? And like, God forbid if you send an email, like that kind of stuff is part of our business as well. And it's all around enabling these generally smaller creative professionals to do their best work.
I just want to call it out for listeners because I think it's so smart to have the end user in mind in terms of how you price it, because you could sit back with a bunch of McKinsey consultants and over optimize this 7 ways till Sunday. But at the end of the day, if you make it too complicated, it's prohibitive. It's actually a friction to getting more supply on the market.
Exactly right.
And so then just to go through the commission piece of it, I remember there were like 57 things from Crate and Barrel on our wedding registry. So you get a small rip off of that?
It depends on the retailer. It depends on the product. But in that case, yeah, that would be the case. So we would get a small commission, which would be similar to any other type of affiliate relationship that exists out there. The interesting thing here, and just as we think about the concept of this whole guest ecosystem, so we offer a whole suite of tools, very comprehensive suite of tools for planning a wedding. And so that ranges from guest list management, invitations, RSVPs, communication, of course, the website itself. And then we are able to both host this registry, which we have some pretty fancy technology behind the scenes to make sure that inventory is kept in sync, and that if you click on that place setting, it's actually there to be purchased on the other side, but also getting couples and their guests to this one place. And so in many ways, we are acting as the central hub for the couple to guest experience. And of course, are trying to consolidate all of the gifting activity into that one place as well, which is better for the couples, but also better for the guests, right? You don't have to click to 7 different sites to try to figure out what's there. And yeah, it's a pretty cool product.
Not to nerd out on this too much, but I guess that's the point of the podcast. You're the control point. You're the operating system for the wedding itself at the end of the day.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
That gives you a lot of unique opportunities to expand elsewhere. And I was looking online just at how the Knot has essentially created this celebration roadmap over time. Can you speak to some of the other products? Because maybe a couple people listening are like, oh, I only thought they did weddings, but it sounds like you found other opportunities to help guests celebrate over time.
There are. And maybe I'll take a quick detour here just to talk about why this industry is so interesting and so unique from other transactions that you might think through. And so we came up with this framework a bunch of years ago. We were in the process of fundraising and trying to explain to potential investors why this is just so different than other marketplaces, classifieds businesses, SaaS businesses, et cetera, that they may have interacted with. And it really comes down to the unique consumer journey that we serve. And so the framework, we sort of call it the high five. So it's these 5 dimensions that are present in every transaction, but are particularly high when you think about the types of transactions that we serve. So high cost, very self-explanatory, but the average cost of a wedding in the United States is in the low $30,000s of dollars. That varies very widely, but it's generally a fairly high cost event. It's a high complexity event because it's not like you're deploying that all, think about buying a car, for example, right? You might go and buy a Toyota Camry and have a similarly high price transaction, but you're buying one car and that's it. It's one and done. Here, that is a dozen plus different vendor categories. Plus you have to think about the project management of it and getting all the guests there. And then you also have the attire, the travel, and the gifts and everything else. It's super, super complex. It's high risk in that it is a once in your lifetime, hopefully, event. And so you're thinking about this as it's got to go really well. And that leads itself to just really deep behavior when it comes to reading reviews, which we are a market leader in, going through the comparison shopping, trying to make sure that you're making the right choice because you want that, you want that DJ to show up and you want them to show up on time. And then high emotion, which is that you see some patterns of, I'll call it, irrational buying. So as people go through the process, they'll find things that they care about, almost in an irrational way where it's like, budget no longer matters, or like this thing has to happen, or they'll try to bring in certain non-negotiables into this in a way that you wouldn't see in a Tuesday night takeout order. And then the last one is high certainty. So once you get engaged, you will follow a 12 to 14 month process over which you will go through more or less the same steps as every other couple has gone before you. It's the first time for you, but we've done this tens of millions of times at this point. And you're going to have similar questions and need similar guidance. And that is where we can be super helpful. And so high cost, high complexity, high risk, high emotion, high certainty. And if you think about those dimensions, they're just as true for your first pregnancy as they are for your wedding. They're just as true for other milestone birthdays, celebrations, anniversaries, where you have this concept of a lot of decisions that need to be made in a time-bound fashion. And on the end of it is hopefully this amazing event. And that, I think, is kind of the mousetrap that we've tried to develop here over time, is how do we bring couples in and guide them through this journey, or bring users in other cases, guide them through this journey to hopefully an excellent outcome at the end.
Wow, that's amazing. I feel like I need a Gantt chart just to keep track of all this, by the way. Like, I knew weddings were complicated just because when we were going through it, and by the way, I was not helpful at all. I had opinions just on the music that the DJ would play, but that's pretty much it. But like, there are a lot of moving parts in the background. And what struck me when you were going through is you were describing like the example of like another high priced item, like a car. That's going to one vendor. Maybe you work with a bank to, have a payment schedule to it. But for you, let's say it's a really, really high price wedding, $100,000, that gets peanut butter spread over maybe 15 different vendors. And you were kind of, like we said, the control point or the quarterback for a lot of that.
Exactly. And so that's why, as we think about our role when it comes to the couple, it is around helping them make informed decisions for that, right? That's really what it is. It's how do we introduce trust? How do we give the right information at your fingertips so that you can make a good decision? Because this is a very complex, very emotional, very risky thing that you are trying to do. And there's a lot of information asymmetry. The couple is doing this for the first time. For many couples, this may be the first time they've ever planned anything at this scale. And the industry incumbents, if you will, right? So the wedding professionals and platforms like ours, we have all this information, right? Because we've seen this before. And so how do we expose that in a way that helps them make the right choice?
Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Cash is king. As the CFO of a SaaS company, I know firsthand how important it is to maintain a healthy AR balance. If you can't effectively manage cash, you can't service debt, make payroll, or invest in growing your business.
That's why I'm so excited to partner with the sponsor of today's episode, Maxio, the leading billing and financial operations platform for B2B SaaS. Maxio helps top SaaS companies like Chili Piper, Crunchbase, and Stack Overflow get cash in the door faster by automating collections and dunning. Gone are the days of manually chasing down invoices. Join the 2,500 plus subscription businesses using Maxio, formerly SaaS Optics and Chargeify, to eliminate revenue leakage and streamline order to cash. It's never been easier to get paid. Visit maxio.com/run the numbers to supercharge your financial operations in 2024. Not only does requesting a demo using the Run the Numbers link help support this podcast, ya boy, you also receive a 10% discount on your first year with Maxio. Woo! That's maxio.com/run the numbers. That's maxio.com/run the numbers. Okay, serious question for all my accounting pros here today. Are you doing what you were hired to do? What I mean is, do you have time to actually be a business partner, or are you buried in tedious manual tasks just to get your journal entries prepared every month? I know how that feels. Leapfin's here to help with that. Leapfin is accounting automation software that automatically prepares and posts reliable journal entries. And that's just the beginning. High-growth businesses like Reddit, Canva, and SeatGeek choose Leapfin to eliminate manual tasks, accelerate month-end close, and enable accounting leaders like you to provide faster insights that will help your company grow. If you're battling messy transaction data from Stripe, Adyen, Shopify, Apple Pay, and other PSPs, and then battling again to get it all into NetSuite, go to leapfin.com to watch their short product intro video. And if you like what you see, request a 15-minute conversation to learn how accounting automation can help you and your team. Check out leapfin.com today. That's leap like jump, fin like shark. I just made that up. I hope they're okay with it. Leapfin.com. And two of the other fingers in the high five there. Trust and then the emotion of it. Yeah. I think it was that it's risky and emotion, if I got that right. And there are a lot of parallels to other CFOs we've talked about. And so we spoke to the CFO, Anil, of Airbase the other day, and he said, my business's number one kind of product is actually trust. It's not like a payments ecosystem. And I think there are also parallels to, in the sense of like, this is a high risk transaction for a lot of people. How do those factors kind of weigh on you? Because wedding, it sounds fun, like in theory, but like it's a one shot deal. Like you cannot have a photographer just like flake out. Like there's a lot of reputational risk, I think, for the knot too, when it comes to doing these transactions.
So the direct answer to your question is that we try to put all of that information online. And that was actually the premise under which the business was founded, was let's put reputation online so that you know exactly who you're working with. And, you know, CJ, if you're booking that DJ and you're going back and forth on the playlist for the wedding, and you know that they've got 120 5-star reviews and have just like, and you get that. And you will see consumers go pages and pages and pages deep on the reviews to look for not just the, hey, this person was great, but also something got messed up. The weather was bad, the road was closed, and they found a way around it. And that's the kind of stuff that allows you to build trust in someone who you're meeting once and then are expecting to show up on one of the biggest days of your life and do an awesome job.
Yeah.
But the thing I will say, and I imagine there'll be some engaged couples in the audience here listening to this, the advice that I always give people is that you as the planner are the only one that knows all the details and how everything is supposed to go. And so also don't worry about it too much, because you know, if the wrong song gets played at the wrong time, the only person that's going to know that is you. And that's also just a kind of good motto as you're going into something like this, of go with the flow a little bit.
There are going to be a lot of good takeaways from the podcast, but that may be number one. Andy, how do you think about the lifetime value of a customer or user over time? Like, does it start with weddings and then in a non-creepy way you expand into other areas of life? Can you speak to that?
So great question, one that we get a lot, but really it comes down to those dynamics that I mentioned. So when someone is planning to get married, their behavior on the internet takes a step change. They start looking for different things. They start being interested in different things. They probably come to our site and create an account and start looking at, you know, the checklist and reading some of our articles to try to figure out what the next thing to do is. And we see similar patterns of behavior when it comes to other life stage events. So similar thing happens when you're having a baby, which is there's a lot of different changes in your behavior that would either bring you to us or that we can set ourselves up to be found if it comes time to search for you. And of course, we wrap all of that with branding campaigns and media of our own to make sure that when it comes time for you to be making those decisions, we're top of mind. But as we think about lifetime value, it's as a two-sided marketplace, it's really those two parts. So from the consumer side, we really do hope that it is happily ever after, which means you're coming to us. We hope to get you early in your journey. We hope to guide you through all of those different purchase decisions along the way. And that's it. And so what that means for us is really our lifetime value for a consumer is of that $30,000+ of spend that you will on average deploy across your wedding day. How much of that have we helped you with across the gifting behavior that you might have? Are we able to help fill most of your gifts? Is our stuff in stock? Are we making it easy for guests to come to your website and give you the gift that you want? So it's those types of questions that we battle with, which is we know we have this finite time with a given user and a given wedding. And how do we capture the most surface area around that, be really helpful and make sure that they're making as many decisions through us as possible? On the other side of that is going to be the wedding professionals. So the B2B side of our two-sided.
Oh, because they have a lifetime value too. Your suppliers there. That's a great point.
And so if you think about a typical small business, the cornerstone of any small business is going to be their recurring business, right? It's if you think about your local coffee shop or bakery, it's those recurrent customers that keep them in business. And our industry does not have that dynamic. So our DJs, photographers, venues, et cetera, are looking to tools like ours to help them refill their entire book of business year after year after year, because they cannot be reliant on the repeat business of couples for obvious reasons. And so they're the ones that we have more of the long-standing relationship with, because we're trying to guide them through this year after year, season after season, and as we're seeing now, generation after generation.
What I love about this model is like front door, it seems like it's all about the lifetime value of a person getting married. But, in the back of the house, it's really about how do you get a recurring, reliable revenue stream from these suppliers that you're monetizing as well? Because while you only hope somebody gets married once, you hope the wedding photographer has, 25 weekends a year booked or something like that, or even more. So it's really neat when you flip it on its head and think about it from the lifetime value of a supplier.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. And so that's why on the consumer side, this business operates like a mixture of a media company, a e-commerce company, and a marketplace. And on the B2B side, it really looks and feels a lot like SaaS.
This is so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's media in the front of the house and seems to be advertising. In the back, it's SaaS. As a CFO, that must delight you too, to have that revenue stream.
Super fun.
That's awesome. Who's your ICP then on the front end of the house? Is there like a particular demographic that you usually go after?
And by ICP, I assume you mean ideal customer profile.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I get lost in the acronyms sometimes. Thanks for helping the listeners.
Yeah, so couples come in all different types. And so it's not necessarily true that there's one primary planner. It's also not necessarily true that there's a woman in the relationship. And there's actually some really interesting country by country differences around this stuff as well.
Really?
Like, for example, just thinking about your kind of most stereotypical US venue and wedding, they would really want to talk to the bride, if there's a bride in the relationship, because that is who they want to sell on the dream. That's who they want to get really excited about the venue. Whereas if you look at a place like India, which we also have a property in, they'll be like, yeah, that's great, but can I talk to her parents? Because
that's where I was going with this, because I was actually not really wondering, like, do you try to market to males? I was like, do you try to market to the bride's father almost? Because traditionally, and this isn't always true. Like a lot of people pay for their own weddings, but like if you think about like what you hear in movies and stuff, it's like the father of the bride usually cutting a big check for a wedding.
In the US, we are primarily targeting the couple that's actually getting married. And that seems to be where most of the decisions are concentrated. Though, of course, we also cater to their friends and the bridal party and the parents and everyone else kind of around this community who may have different roles. And we've actually seen in some cases, couples delegating out certain decisions to people in their friend network and family as well. But the typical journey, the couple is making most of the decisions. And within that, yes, it's true that the typical bell curve, if you will, so the average marriage age in the United States is about 32. The bell curve around that will go from your mid 20s to your late 30s. And so that tends to be where the vast majority of our couples are concentrated, which also leads to an interesting dynamic because at the lower end of that bell curve, you now have the older side of Gen Z who are now in prime wedding age. And so we have this almost generational shift that we're starting to see on our site of Gen Z's getting married. And, it's interesting. They're just as passionate, if not more so about weddings than the last generation, than the millennials. But within that comes a different focus. So they're really focused on things like authenticity versus millennials tended to focus more on uniqueness. There's a much bigger focus on integrating cultural parts of cultural elements into the wedding, things that sort of bring out who they are into this ceremony and this celebration. And so it is both really cool to be on the front end of that. But as I mentioned before, because we have so many different parts of our business, we also are looked to as being a somewhat authoritative voice and a thought leader when it comes to things like trends, styles, and on the B2C side, what should I be thinking about? On the B2B side, how do I best engage with this new generation of couples that are coming to us through your site?
Yeah, this is complex. It changes based on geography, cultural norms, time. And like my mind as a SaaS CFO is like, well, maybe the decision maker isn't the ultimate budget holder here, like to go a little too deep, but dynamic selling environment here.
Totally.
I want to call out something that I thought was incredible. You drove $750 million in gifting to couples in 2023. Can you talk about what that means to the company culturally?
That's right. And it's growing fast. An interview question I used to occasionally ask people before people told me stop doing that was I'd ask potential candidates, what percentage of the US population do you think our product touches every year? And I'm not going to put you on the spot, but if you start to think about the number of couples that get married in the US every year, it's about 2 million. You start thinking, expanding out beyond that to the number of guests that an average wedding has, which is somewhere in the low hundreds, in the sort of 110 plus or minus range.
Yeah.
And there's obviously going to be some overlap because if you're going to
Multiple
wedding, you're probably going
year.
to 2, 3, or 4.
Yeah, my summer last year, like I was all over the knot apparently.
Thank you for your business. And you start to get to a pretty large percentage of the U.S. adult population.
It's got to be over 2/3, right?
And so, like as we're recruiting product managers, for example, that's really, really cool because you are building a product that's going to touch most of adult Americans in any given year, and it's something that you may have never really thought about as that big of a company or that big of an industry, but indeed it touches a lot of people. And I think if there's anything that we've learned coming out of the pandemic is that these in-person connections, celebrations, getting together is more important than ever. And so it really is cool. So your question was, how valuable is that to us? It's really valuable because we recognize the role that we have in empowering these celebrations. There's also the other side of it. So that's the consumer side. There's the B2B side, which I've mentioned as well. And so in the same year in 23, we drove more than $2 billion in sales to our small business partners, to our wedding professionals. And that expands to roughly $4 billion globally. So we have a very important role in this industry of bringing the two sides together, and are really proud of both the consumer side of things, but also the amount of business that we're able to send to our SMB partners.
That's awesome. You brought up the pandemic. I did want to ask, and I hope you're not like shuddering from it, like it was like it gave you gray hair. How did COVID impact how you staffed and forecasted the business? And I'm asking more from like a finance team perspective.
Yeah.
I imagine there was a slowdown and then just a massive avalanche of weddings. Like, how do you possibly forecast something like that?
Well, first I should acknowledge that I remember in January 2020 coming back from a New Year's break and talking to one of my colleagues in China who was saying that there was an outbreak of a virus there, and thinking, I wonder how I should think about the budget I just
right.
locked relative to
that was like thing. The first thing you think about.
And let me tell you, I did not forecast that accurately. But it ended up being so the pandemic was obviously tough for the wedding industry because we were at the crosshairs of a lot of the restrictions and things that were just frankly unknown and or dangerous. And we saw the industry as a whole contract that year in terms of spend by almost 50%. However, what we saw at the same time was that people were not canceling their weddings or celebrations; they were postponing them, and so they still wanted to get married. Just it may not be on their original schedule. And at pretty much all points in the pandemic, there still was a light at the end of the tunnel in terms of when things would come back to maybe not normal, but come back to some level of normalcy. It certainly wasn't the 2 weeks that we were all initially hoping for, but there was always a light at the end of the tunnel. And as long as that was there, couples were spending a lot of time together. There were still lots of people getting engaged. There were still lots of people that were excited to get married. Those people that were excited to get married were on their computers, were on their phones, were starting to do wedding planning.
That's a good point. You can see the activity, like it's still there.
And as I mentioned, in terms of how our business works, as long as the activity is there were deposit streams that were going to our Wedding Pro partners. So people were booking them into the future. And there was a fair bit of optimism throughout. So we did do a couple of things to quickly shore up and help. So as you remember, there was a bunch of government programs that were launched. So PPP, there was some additional tax programs that were there as well. And we partnered with some of our accountants and advisors to share that advice at a large scale with our B2B population, right? They don't all have the budgets to go out and hire EY to help them analyze what they should do regarding PPP, but we could, and we could share that on a large scale. We launched a $10 million vendor assistance program that we deployed into the US audience, and it was for vendors that were particularly impacted by the pandemic. So even within vendor categories, and when I say vendors, I'm using it interchangeably with wedding professionals. There were some wedding professionals who were hit really hard. There were some wedding professionals who actually saw a boon in business, because you could imagine outdoor venues suddenly became really, really popular in the summer of 2020, right, especially in states where small gatherings were allowed. And so you really had a wide range of outcomes. On our e-commerce side, we saw, so we were first to market with a free reprint offer for stationery. So if you had your date postponed, we allowed you to reprint, save the dates and invites for free.
Oh man, I didn't even think about that.
And then we actually saw a lot of gifting activity pick up in a way that we did not expect, because even if the weddings got smaller or if they didn't happen on the initial timeline, you still had guests, family, relatives, loved ones sending gifts to the couple, because sort of their generosity did not change. If anything, I saw it go up during that period. And so overall, we certainly had to make some tough decisions during that period, but we really rallied around the industry as a whole and tried to think about how we could mobilize our internal staff, our external advisors, our financial position to help the industry more broadly through things like education, awareness, like literally helping couples rebook weddings if we could do that. And of course, supporting our wedding professional community.
There's like a logistical nightmare and unraveling that probably had to occur all at once. So I don't envy you there. This is going to maybe come across as a tone deaf question to people listening, but from a GAAP revenue perspective, do you get to recognize revenue when something is booked, or do you have to like wait for the actual event to occur to recognize everything associated with the wedding?
So for our two-sided marketplace business, because it is sold as a subscription product, we recognize revenue ratably over the period. And so, as you could imagine, that was fairly stable throughout the period because it's again, it looks and feels a lot like SaaS. On the e-commerce side of our business, we recognize revenue there typically as items are shipped.
As they're shipped.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which would be similar to other businesses of that type. And so that correlates directly with purchase activity. Mm-hmm. And then on the broader kind of media publishing side of our business, where we work with these larger brands and more, we'll call national or global scale advertisers, that also tends to have some sort of ratable metric. So whether that's clicks, impressions, leads, campaigns. And so there's not as much volatility as you would imagine with the actual events taking place or not in a given period of time.
Gotcha. Getting under the hood of this business. This is one of the more fascinating ones we've done. Some of this reminds me of the conversation we had with Lonnie Baker, CFO of Eventbrite, bringing creators together with their audiences and kind of how they looked at ticket sales. Maybe an odd question, and I ask because Lonnie had said that, like, hey, whenever we sample or survey our creators, the number one thing that they always ask for is, how do I drive more tickets? That's like the number one thing they get from all the surveys. And then it's like number 92 on the list is like the next thing down. When you talk to the different suppliers on your, I guess, platform, what's the number one thing that they ask the not for? Is it just more weddings? But then again, that's hard to just create weddings out of thin air.
That typically is going to be the number one thing, right? So just going back to the mentality of let's just think about a DJ for example. If you're primarily a wedding DJ, your peak season is going to be somewhere between the early summer and the late fall. So it's kind of that May, June to October period is going to be where most of your wedding activity happens. Within that, you have prime days, which tend to be Saturdays and then Sundays on long weekends. And you're trying to fill as many of those as you possibly can. And so when it comes to the types of discussions that we have, it's how do we do that and how do we do that efficiently? So if we can help them stand out, fantastic. If we can help them make sure that they have good content on their storefront, that their storefront is optimized for conversion, that it attracts the right type of couple to them such that their close rate is higher. Those are the types of conversations that we have when it comes to kind of the day-to-day account management. It's how can we help you, CJ, the DJ, be as successful as you can be to fill up your summer. Now, of course, there's other things around that when it comes to just general business efficiency. And I mentioned some of that earlier in terms of broader education, but you can imagine a whole host of other topics ranging from payment processing to different trends to, right, like what's the best way to engage with a Gen Z couple versus a millennial couple versus, gosh, Andy, what should I be doing on TikTok, right? Like, I don't have time to create 3 videos a day. Like, help me figure out that stuff. And so we have a team of educators that we work with to kind of bring that information to the forefront of the wedding professional community and make sure that we are leveraging our scale to help them put their best foot forward. But really, it is around help me fill my weekends.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I want to transition a little bit and talk about frameworks that you use to get the job done.
Sure.
And a lot of this, I'm guessing, came from different parts of your career. I know you were on the investing side for a while, and that's how you got to know the company. And You told me that you think of truth seeking as one of the most important qualities that a CFO can have, and debating if an idea is good or not. How does that manifest itself day to day at the Knot?
Yeah, so I am a kind of a natural red team member here. I would say that's probably one of the things that I'm known for, and I'll argue three sides of a two-sided coin, right? And for me, a lot of that is around just making sure that if there are, like, I just believe so passionately that the truth comes from debate and bringing out people's perspectives and points of view, and getting people to argue, to bring their point of view, to find the Swiss cheese holes, so to speak, in an argument is the way that we do that. And so it manifests itself in a lot of different ways. I'm happy to go through an example if that's helpful. But really, it's like a day-to-day mentality of if there's a problem in front of us, like let's debate every single angle to make sure that we're not missing something, so that we can be confident in our point of view.
That's awesome. It would be great if you could go through an example of something just that you've debated internally recently, not to put you on the spot or anything, but like, I think healthy pushback is like a skill that CFOs need to work on over time. And I've shot myself in the foot so many times of being too aggressive with it. I think it's kind of like an art of like pushing back in a way that you're not challenging the person, but the problem.
That's exactly right. So I'll give one that is pretty fun and ultimately a very successful outcome. So can have very happy to talk about it, which is as we thought about getting into the stationery category. So launching our invitations and save the dates business. So when we think about a new initiative, one of the frameworks that I like to use is build, buy, or buddy. So we want to get into something. Do we build it from scratch? Do we buy the capabilities? Do we partner with someone or buddy to get to the end state that we're going for? And we, of course, thought about all of those different paths as we were thinking about entering into this category. And so, you can do the math on this, but as we mentioned before, there's 2 million weddings per year in the United States. There's 110 plus guests. There's going to be a lot of couples in that situation, but you still get to a fairly high number of unique invitations and save the dates that need to be sent out. And it gets to be a pretty exciting addressable market fairly quickly that at the time we weren't really addressing in any given way. And there's a lot of synergy with other things that couples are doing on our sites, because they already have a website, and it's great if the save the dates and invites look like your website and there's thematic consistency. We're already being used for RSVPs and guest list management. So gosh, like, wouldn't it be great if those things were connected as well? And so we decided to explore entering the category. And it was just a very, very hotly debated thing, because at any time that I have approached a new initiative with our build team, with our engineers and product managers, of course, we're going to build it best ourselves, right? We are going to be the best at building anything. If we buy something externally, then it's going to create some level of disruption and reintegration, which can be painful. And typically, no one wants to partner, but I find it to be oftentimes the best starting point, because you can focus on the right part of the value chain for your business and have your partner focused on the right part of the value chain for them. And we looked at a bunch of different options. We looked at all of these things, sized them out, and debated over 3-4 months, the different scenarios, and ultimately ended up getting somewhere like in the middle of all three of those things, which is that we ended up buying a woman-led company out of Portland, Oregon, who had built just enough that the relationships were established. They had good partnerships with printers. They had a good design muscle, and we could build a ton on top of it and control the experience end to end while still being at the right part of the value chain, if that makes sense. So I think at any point along that journey, if you went to someone in the company and asked them what they think the answer is, they would have been a fairly definitive, like, well, we should of course do this ourselves, or we should of course buy an established industry player, or we should of course partner with someone who has significant market share and design inventory. And we ended up doing a hybrid, but kind of none of those three things. And it was only through the process of like debating, well, what's the value that we're trying to deliver into this equation? Where do we have a right to win versus someone else, that you can really tease out the correct answer for the situation.
Andy, you can correct me if I'm wrong by putting a label on this, but you seem like you're a first principles thinker.
Try to be. I try to be, for sure.
Thanks for taking us through that tactical example, because I feel like it's hard to kind of see how these things manifest itself within a company. And friction is healthy. It's just like determining what level of friction is right. It's common for people to say, like, that's the way we've always done X, Y, and Z, or we used to do it this way at my old company. So we'd spoken to John McCauley, CFO of Calendly, recently, and he said this line of thinking is one of his biggest pet peeves. It sounds like you're also the type of person who pushes back when those lines of thinking are present.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned, I love bringing out dissenting opinions out of a conversation to get to the right answer. But I see it as one of the roles of a CFO to teach the company how to think, how to approach particular problems. And that, I think, goes hand in hand with not accepting conventional wisdom at face value. And so I really want people to think about what they're trying to solve and get their perspective on it. Not, this is how I've heard it done, this is not how I've seen it done, but this is truly what I think, with all of my experience and intellect and purview on the business. This is truly what I think. And so the way that ends up playing out is I ask a lot of questions. If you were to poll the broader population at the Not Worldwide, they'd probably tell you I ask too many questions. But all of that is in an effort to try to build the right rigor and the right level of critical reasoning when it comes to evaluating potential decisions, when it comes to evaluating new products. The role of a CFO in a large part, I think, is capital allocator, right? It is our job to determine where to put our chips on the table, where to make the bets. And so that means that any bet that we're making, whether that's a new product, a new acquisition, a new hire, a new marketing campaign, has to be evaluated from the perspective of return on investment and what is that potential bet going to yield for us, with, of course, some level of risk weighting for, be able to discount it back to what it means today. And the people that know that stuff best are going to be the subject matter experts, right? The engineer is going to know a lot better than the marketer about the product they're going to build. The marketer is going to know a lot better than the engineer about the campaign they're about to run. But I do see it as the role of the CFO to create some level of common language around that is rooted in return on investment, or risk-weighted return on investment, to be able to evaluate these things on a consistent basis. And the way that'll show up is that teams, no matter what team they're on, what department they're in, will start presenting things in a way that is meant to be somewhat benchmarkable and rooted in impact, not rooted in activity or input.
Yeah. That's awesome that it's rooted in impact, not activity and input, because a lot of times people will measure if they hit the problem statement, but just like how much effort they put into it. It's like, well, it's kind of a results-oriented business. And in fact, if you're the chief resource allocator and you're putting all this effort and resources into it and it's not yielding returns, I love how you said it, the risk-weighted return on investment. That's a great way to put it. Andy, I'm going to take you into what we call our long-ass lightning round. The first question I ask everybody, what's an example of something you've screwed up on the job before?
So, CJ, I have done a lot of M&A activity in my time here, probably
more than 20 transactions in your career, right?
Probably something like that. And and everyone is difficult and everyone comes with its own unique lesson. But the one thing that I feel that gets messed up more than anything else is integration. And so there's a couple of deals earlier in my time here that we did not integrate fast enough. We kept separate. We had different branding, different all hands. It's almost, we ran a business as if it was a separate business, even though we were trying to make it part of the core. And it was all in this effort not to rock the boat too much, not to disrupt things, not to get in the way of something that's going well, even if we think that it could go much, much better. And so the lesson that I've learned from this, and the phrase came from an M&A talk that I went to probably 7 or 8 years ago, is called "Burn the Lifeboat." And so,
Ooh.
yeah, and so when you bring an acquisition on, it's too easy to have that little lifeboat or that little dinghy that's floating along next to the main cruise liner and doing their own thing. And it's not until you burn that lifeboat and say everyone's going to come on board the main ship that you really get the value out of the thing that you're trying to do.
That's a great clip.
Yeah. So I now advocate for anything that we do. Faster is better. Give people clarity. Even if you're making a decision that's going to impact people 6 months from now, tell them now so that they know what to work towards. And yeah, burn the lifeboat. There's an example that's coming to mind as I'm talking about this, where
please
bring it back to the us finance folks. But we had an integration about 5-6 years ago of our FP&A teams across two different brands, and everyone was working out of their own documents, their own Google Drive, their own templates. And we created a new shared drive and shared templates, but people were sort of rooted in their own things. And so I gave people fair warning. I gave people fair warning, but I had our IT team one weekend just turn off access to all the old drives. And it was like, that's it. No more lifeboats.
That's actually burning the ships, burning the PowerPoints.
You're in it now. Everyone's here. We have one drive, one set of templates. Everyone's in this thing together. There's no more of this us and them. There's no more, legacy company A versus legacy company B mentality. We're in it together.
I love the burn the ships mentality. We'd spoken to Matt Gallatin, who's a CFO at Stack Overflow, and he talked about a previous job where they killed off a revenue line item that was responsible for like 85, 90% of their business. And they all made this strategic decision. Yeah, like ballsy move. Like as a management team, if we're going to have like a venture backable return here, we can't just keep growing linearly. And this thing over here, which by the way, Google is coming into the space, like we should probably not hitch our wagons to that. But he said the same thing, like they had to finally come to grips with, and it wasn't an acquisition in that standpoint. It was kind of the opposite. It was a divestment of a revenue line. It ended up being, they divested it, but like we have to go all in on this, because if we keep operating like there's this dinghy or this lifeboat that we can get off at any moment, we're not going to fully commit, and this isn't going to be a good outcome.
Love that. All
right, next one. Can you walk me through your finance software stack? What are you using to get the job done today?
Yes. So we use NetSuite for our ERP.
Nice.
We use OneStream for our financial planning module. So we use OneStream for financial planning. We use Oracle for HRIS. We use Coupa for our procure to payment flow. We are using Workiva for financial reporting, as well as our impact reporting and ESG reporting.
Okay.
And lots of other tools. How happy to go deeper, but yeah.
What are you using for payments today?
For payments, we are mostly on Stripe when it comes to payments, and that's because we have we talked about our registry business earlier as well. One of the big trends in registries is cash and cash gifting, and so we do find that their Connect product is quite good for all the things related to creating sub accounts for couples when they're looking to collect cash.
Nice. Last one I got for you. What's the craziest thing you've ever seen someone try to expense?
Great question. So
a wedding?
We have had some weddings expense, but those have been parts of sweepstake or promotional things. So that's a little
That's
different.
actually kind of cool.
But yes, we actually have a program called the Win a Wedding program, which we run in most of the markets that we're in, which actually you can, as anyone listening to this podcast, win a wedding and you can expense it to us. So that is not that crazy because we actually do it quite frequently.
Tell them Mostly Metrics and Run the Numbers sent you.
That's right.
Tell them Run the Numbers sent you, and maybe you'll do better. I don't know.
But probably the craziest one that comes to mind. So I will caveat that this was probably close to 10 years ago and before we had the types of systems like we just talked about and maturity and controls that we have in place now. But we had an employee who was remote before digital nomading or working remote was cool. And as part of that would fly into the office and then fly back to their home. Except it took us some time to realize that their home kept changing. And so it was only once they had expensed a flight back home to Iceland that some eyebrows were raised. And we're like, I don't think that's the spirit of
Imagine that commute. Iceland. That's a new one. Sir, I thought you lived in Vermont.
Exactly.
Okay. That's a good one. Andy, this has been a blast. I loved learning about your business model. Like, I'm going to be thinking about this all night. Like, getting under the hood was a blast. And I appreciate you being so generous with your time.
Likewise, CJ. It's been fun to chat with you. If you have any good ideas for us, would love to debate them.
Awesome. Love it.
All right. Thank you so much.
See ya. Run the Numbers is a Mostly LLC production. Yelling an intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by some AI thingamajig. Podcast and video editing is done by Cleancast at cleancast.io. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses, LOL. If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. And also check out mostlymetrics.com. That's my newsletter where I explore business models and financial metrics. Thanks for riding with me. Share this with your friends. Peace.